My mother, who had her eyes on my inheritance, lured me into a family meeting with attorneys. But when they slid the documents toward me, I responded, "That's odd. I brought my own." My lawyer entered, and the room went quiet. "Hey, read it, I'm Sarah. And if you'd asked me a year ago about my family, I'd have described us as complex but tight-knit. Now I'd say I was the only one clinging to that illusion. I'm 33, a full-time nonprofit manager and occasional fixer of messes. I've always been the steady one, the person who stays composed, makes the calls, and sorts out the chaos. When my father passed 2 years ago, I became the family's anchor, the reliable one. I handled the funeral plans, dealt with the estate lawyer, and managed all the paperwork because Mom claimed it was too painful for her. I didn't mind because grief is heavy, and I loved my dad. But the real breakdown didn't happen at the funeral. It started later, subtly, like a tiny fracture in a window that goes unnoticed. Until it shatters completely. It began with distance. Mom's calls became less frequent. My younger brother, Ethan, turned strangely distant. I attributed it to mourning. We were all hurting, each coping in our own way. But then I noticed odd details. One day, I visited Mom's house and saw that family photos on the mantel had been rearranged. Every picture of Dad with me was missing, replaced. At a family gathering, she introduced me to her friend Linda as my eldest, who does some charity work, dismissing my 2 graduate degrees and years of leadership. The final strike came one chilly Tuesday afternoon, 14 months after Dad's death. I was in my office when an email arrived from a law firm. Subject: family meeting, estate closure. I stared at the screen, confused. I hadn't been informed of any new meeting. Dad's estate was settled, or so I thought. His will was clear. The house went to Mom, the financial trust was divided equally between Ethan and me, and a few specific gifts went to relatives and charities. So why this sudden meeting? I sent the email to our family's estate lawyer, Miss Ellen Carter, a sharp-witted woman in her 60s and Dad's longtime friend. She called me right away. "This isn't from my firm," she said firmly. "They've hired a different legal team." "Does that mean?" I asked. "It means someone's making moves without my knowledge. Be cautious, Sarah. Attend, but bring legal support." The truth unraveled quickly. The meeting was set for the following Saturday at 2 p.m. in a sleek downtown law office, not the warm, familiar office of our usual attorney. This place was all glass and steel, radiating wealth and calculation. I arrived early, dressed in a gray suit and cream blouse, calm and composed. Miss Carter joined me minutes later, her heels clicking, carrying a sleek briefcase. She didn't speak as we rode the elevator. She just said, "Stay calm. Watch first." When we entered the room, Mom was already there, adorned with flashy new jewelry, not the simple necklace Dad gave her decades ago. Her posture was rigid, her face expressionless. Ethan sat beside her, more anxious than confident. Across from them were 2 unfamiliar lawyers. The younger one, polished and eager, stood to greet me. "Sarah, thanks for coming. We're reviewing some updates to your father's estate." "I was told it was finalized last year," I said, shaking his hand without a smile. "There have been changes," he replied. "Curious," Miss Carter said coolly, settling beside me. The lawyer opened a folder and pushed a thick stack of papers toward me. "These are the updated inheritance documents," he said. "Your mother has requested a reallocation of assets. Ethan will be the primary beneficiary of the trust, and the house will be co-owned by them. Your share will be converted into a smaller, staggered payout." I glanced at the papers. My name was printed on them with a signature line ready. I didn't touch the pen. Instead, I looked at Mom. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mom," I said quietly. She finally looked up, her gaze cold. "You're busy with your nonprofit work," she said. "You don't need this. Ethan will help me with the house. It's practical." That's when it hit me, not grief, not rage, but understanding. I clasped my hands, leaned forward, and said, "That's strange. I brought my own." I nodded toward the door, and Miss Carter's colleague, a seasoned attorney with keen eyes and a thick folder, walked in. He set the folder on the table. "Before we proceed," he said, "you should know we've filed a motion with the probate court about these changes as they contradict the original legally binding will." The room went still, absolutely silent. Mom's face flickered, her poise cracking for a moment. Ethan stared at me like I'd deceived them. But I hadn't. They had deceived me. For months, while I managed Dad's affairs, visited his grave, and ensured Mom had what she needed, they'd been scheming. Altering documents, hiring lawyers, trying to erase me from my father's legacy. And I'd anticipated it. Not because I'm a genius, but because I'd seen this before. When I was 17, my parents nearly emptied my college savings to cover Ethan's legal trouble after a reckless car crash that damaged property and nearly hurt someone. They called it a one-off, a crisis. But it wasn't the last time they asked me to sacrifice for him. This time I didn't agree, I didn't speak. I let Miss Carter take over. As the opposing lawyers realized they'd stepped into a situation they hadn't planned for, they shuffled papers and whispered. "We'll need to postpone," one muttered. "No need," Miss Carter said. "The court will handle it. But no, we have emails, recordings, and notes from prior estate discussions that will show these changes were made under undue influence." Ethan stood. "This is absurd." Mom followed, her voice shaky. "Sarah, what are you doing?" "We're family." "No," I said softly, standing too. "We were, but you chose differently." Then I left. I walked out of that sterile room without looking back. Outside, the air was crisp and refreshing. Miss Carter followed, a quiet strength beside me. We didn't speak until we reached the street. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, though my eyes stung. "It's not about the money," I said softly. "It's what it represented, what they were willing to do for it." Miss Carter paused, then said, "Sometimes people find it easier to rewrite history than confront who they've become." Her words stayed with me. The weeks that followed felt surreal, like watching a collapse from afar. The probate hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later. I didn't speak to Mom or Ethan during that time, not out of anger, but because I needed clarity. I needed to process feelings I'd suppressed for years. Grief for the family I thought I had, regret for all the times I stayed quiet to keep peace, and something new, liberation. For the first time, I wasn't managing everyone else's emotions. I wasn't smoothing conflicts or absorbing pain. I was choosing myself, unapologetically. 3 days before the hearing, Ethan visited my office. I almost turned him away, but I wanted to hear him out. He looked drained, pale, less defiant, more lost. "I didn't realize it would go this far," he said, shifting uncomfortably. "I thought Mom was just tweaking things. I didn't question it." "You didn't question it because you didn't want to know," I said. He didn't argue. "She said you didn't need it," he continued. "That you had your own life, your own success, and that justified it?" "No," he admitted, "but I've always been the one who needed more. You were always okay." "Being okay doesn't mean being expendable, Ethan." He looked away. "I know," I exhaled. "You want to make this right, be truthful in court, admit what happened. Stop pretending it was a mistake." He hesitated, then nodded, and to his credit, he followed through. At the hearing, his testimony mattered. He confessed that Mom had driven the changes, framing them as practical, a way to simplify her life. She'd claimed I'd be fine with it. Mom didn't speak during the hearing, sitting stone-faced, as if stunned her story was being questioned. The court ruled in my favor. The original will stood. The trust remained equally divided as Dad intended. The house stayed Mom's, but the trust's terms couldn't be altered without both beneficiaries' agreement, mine included. It was a calm, clear ruling. No theatrics. Just resolution, but what lingered was what came next. A week later, Mom sent a letter, no remorse, no reasoning, just one sentence. "You were always your father's child." It should have hurt, but it didn't, because she was right. Dad was the one who truly saw me. He trusted me with his estate, his memory, his principles. If that made me his instead of hers, I was at peace with it. Months passed. The distance became permanent. Ethan and I exchanged occasional holiday texts, but nothing deep. He was trying in his own way to mend what he'd helped break, and I allowed it slowly. Mom and I never spoke again. Not out of hatred, but because rebuilding requires effort from both sides, and she offered none. Instead, I rebuilt myself. I took a brief leave from work and traveled solo. I saw things I'd always dreamed of. The aurora borealis in Norway, cherry blossoms in Tokyo, an art gallery in Florence that moved me to tears. Slowly, something returned to me, my voice. Not the careful, peacemaking tone I'd used for years, but my true voice. One that laughed freely, set boundaries, and asked for what it needed without shame. By the time I returned, I felt like a woman who had claimed her own narrative, no longer the supporting character in everyone else's story, but the writer of her own. Dad's legacy wasn't the money. It was the quiet, steady reminder. You deserve to take up space, even in a room that never made room for you. A year later, Miss Carter called. She was retiring. "I wanted you to know, Sarah," she said. "You were one of my last clients, and you reminded me why I do this work." "Because of messy families," I teased. She chuckled. "Because of women who learn to stop carrying burdens that aren't theirs." I hung up with a warm heart. In the end, it wasn't the courtroom, the lawyers, or the victory that transformed me. It was that one moment in the boardroom when I said, "That's strange, I brought my own." For the first time, I did. I brought my own boundaries, my own value, my own legacy, and that silence that followed. That was the sound of finally being seen.